Millionaire invites ex-wife to his wedding to shame her, but she stuns him with an unbelievable. The sleek black envelope arrived on a crisp October morning, nestled between utility bills and a catalogue from Williams-Sonoma. Clara Bennett nearly missed it as she sorted through the stack at her kitchen counter, sunlight streaming through the bay windows of her Brooklyn Heights apartment. But the gilded edges caught her eye, and she paused, her fingers hesitating over the elegant script embossed across the front. Elliot Grayson and Sophia Reed request the honor of your presence at their wedding. For a moment the world seemed to still. Clara blinked, rereading the names. Her hands trembled slightly, not with fear, but with a mixture of disbelief and irritation. Elliot Grayson, her ex-husband, the man who had once promised her the world before casting her aside in his pursuit of power, was marrying again, and he wanted her there to witness it. Her first instinct was to toss the invitation in the trash, but curiosity tugged at her. Clara sat down at the marble-topped kitchen island, the envelope still in her hand. She traced her fingers over the embossed letters, memories flooding back like a dam had burst. They had met during their junior year at Boston University, where Clara had been a literature major with dreams of becoming a writer, and Elliot was an ambitious business student with an eye for startups. He'd swept her off her feet with his charm and unrelenting determination. Clara could still picture the small Italian bistro, Trattoria di Monica, where they'd had their first date in Boston's North End. Elliot had been late, caught up in a meeting with his tech co-founder, but he'd arrived with flowers from a street vendor and an apology that seemed to erase the frustration. "I promise you," he had said over a shared plate of tiramisu, "one day we'll have everything we've ever dreamed of. You'll have the freedom to write your novels, and I'll make sure you never have to worry about anything." But that promise had come with a price. As Elliot's ambitions grew, so did the distance between them. Late nights turned into missed dinners, and Clara's dreams of writing were pushed aside to support his relentless pursuit of success. Their marriage had unraveled like a poorly tied knot. By the time Elliot's company, Grayson Enterprises, had secured its first multi-million-dollar deal, Clara felt like a ghost in her own life. The man she had fallen in love with had been consumed by his hunger for wealth and status. The final straw had come during a heated argument when Elliot dismissed her writing as a hobby that wasn't worth investing time in. When the divorce papers arrived, Clara had signed them without hesitation. She had walked away with little more than her dignity and a burning determination to rebuild her life. And rebuild she did. Clara poured herself into her work, founding Bright Horizons, a non-profit that provided literacy programs for underserved communities. Over time, her small organization grew into a nationally recognized initiative. Clara stared at the invitation, her mind reeling. Why would Elliot want her at his wedding? It felt less like an olive branch and more like a calculated move. Knowing him, it probably was. He thrived on appearances, and what better way to flaunt his new life than by inviting the woman he had left behind? Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a text from her best friend, Naomi Carter. "Naomi, brunch tomorrow? You need to spill the tea on that gala last week." Clara typed a quick reply. "Sure, and I have something even juicier to tell you." As she set her phone down, Clara made a decision. She would go to the wedding, not for Elliot, but for herself. She wanted to see with her own eyes the life he thought was better than the one they'd shared. And perhaps, just perhaps, she'd remind him that she wasn't the same woman he had underestimated. That night, Clara opened her laptop and began researching Elliot's fiancée, Sophia Reed. A quick Google search revealed dozens of articles and Instagram posts about the it-girl socialite. Sophia was stunning, with a penchant for designer brands like Dior and Gucci, and a flawless feed filled with exotic vacations and red carpet appearances. Clara smirked. "Of course," she muttered under her breath. But as she scrolled further, something about Sophia's polished perfection seemed hollow. Clara leaned back in her chair, her thoughts turning to her wardrobe. If she was going to attend this spectacle, she needed to make an impression, and she knew just the designer to call: Christian Siriano. The first chapter ends with Clara dialing a number, determination sparking in her eyes. "Hi, Megan. It's Clara Bennett. I need a dress. Something unforgettable." The steady hum of conversation and clinking cutlery filled the air as Clara walked into Bluebird London, her favorite brunch spot overlooking Columbus Circle. The chic interior, with its sleek navy blue booths and brass fixtures, was the perfect backdrop for New York's elite to sip mimosas and trade gossip. But Clara wasn't here for gossip, not entirely. Naomi Carter waved her over, a radiant smile lighting up her face. Her auburn curls framed her sharp features, and her emerald green blazer matched her vibrant personality. Naomi had been Clara's rock through the tumultuous years of her divorce, always ready with a bottle of wine or a well-timed reality check. "Over here, darling," Naomi called, raising her glass of Prosecco. Clara slid into the booth opposite her, a soft smile playing on her lips. "You always manage to make me feel like I'm walking into an episode of Sex and the City." Naomi laughed, raising her glass in a toast. "What can I say? I'm a classic Samantha with a hint of Miranda. Now spill. You said you had something juicy, and I've been dying to know all morning." Clara hesitated, glancing at the menu before setting it down. She reached into her purse and pulled out the sleek black invitation, sliding it across the table. Naomi's eyes widened as she picked it up. "Elliot," she exclaimed, her voice loud enough to draw a few curious glances. "That smug bastard invited you to his wedding. What's his game?" Clara shrugged, leaning back in her seat. "I've been trying to figure that out myself. He doesn't do anything without a reason." Naomi's eyes narrowed as she scanned the invitation. "Sophia Reed? Isn't she that socialite who hosted that charity gala at the plaza last year? I remember reading about her in Vogue. Looks like Elliot's trying to upgrade his image." Clara smirked, though there was no humor in it. "It's not like he needs to. His company's valuation hit the billions last year. He's got everything he ever wanted: money, power, a trophy fiancé. And now he wants me to see it." Naomi set the invitation down with a sharp tap. "So what are you going to do? Ignore it? Send a strongly worded letter? Hire a skywriter to tell him to go to hell?" "I'm going," Clara said, her voice calm but firm. Naomi blinked, momentarily stunned. "You're serious?" Clara nodded. "It's not about him. It's about me. I need to see for myself that I'm past all of it, that he doesn't have power over me anymore. Besides—" She paused, a glint of mischief in her eyes. "I wouldn't mind showing him what he gave up." Naomi leaned back, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Now that's the Clara I know. Okay, if you're going to do this, you need to go all in. No half measures. What's the plan?" The two women spent the next hour crafting a strategy that felt more like preparing for a battle than attending a wedding. Naomi sipped her Prosecco thoughtfully as Clara outlined her ideas. "First," Clara began, "I need a dress. Not just any dress. A showstopper. I'm thinking Christian Siriano, or maybe something custom from Oscar de la Renta." Naomi nodded approvingly. "Good start. You need to remind everyone in that room, including Elliot, that you're a force to be reckoned with. Second," Clara continued, "I'll arrive with someone, not to make Elliot jealous. That's not the point. But to show him that I've moved on, that I'm not dwelling on the past." Naomi arched an eyebrow. "Anyone in mind?" Clara hesitated. She thought of James Gallagher, the charismatic business tycoon she'd met at a fundraiser last year. They had shared a few dinners, but she had kept things light. James was magnetic, charming, and, most importantly, respected. "I might have someone," Clara admitted, her cheeks flushing slightly. Naomi leaned forward, eyes gleaming. "James Gallagher? Please tell me it's James Gallagher." Clara rolled her eyes, though she couldn't suppress a smile. "We'll see." "Perfect. And the final step?" Naomi asked, gesturing for the waiter to bring another round of drinks. Clara's expression turned serious. I need to be prepared for whatever Elliot throws my way. This isn't just a wedding, it's a stage. He'll want to show off, to prove that he's won. But I'm not playing that game. I'm showing up for me, for the woman I've become. Naomi reached across the table and squeezed Clara's hand. You've already won, Clara. He just doesn't know it yet. The days that followed were a whirlwind of preparation. Clara scheduled a fitting at Christian Siriano's studio in the garment district, where the designer himself suggested a sleek crimson gown with a plunging neckline and intricate beadwork. This dress says power, confidence, and a touch of revenge, Siriano said with a wink as Clara admired herself in the mirror. Next came the details. A diamond bracelet from Tiffany Co., a pair of Christian Louboutin heels, and a hairstylist appointment at Frederick Fekkai on Fifth Avenue. Every choice was deliberate, a reflection of the strength she had reclaimed since her divorce. As the day of the wedding approached, Clara felt a mix of nerves and resolve. She knew attending would stir emotions she hadn't faced in years, but she also knew it was time to close this chapter of her life, for good. On the eve of the wedding, Clara sat alone in her living room, a glass of wine in hand. The crimson gown hung nearby, a symbol of the woman she had become. She thought about Elliot, about the life they had shared and the one she had built without him. Her phone buzzed with a message from James. Looking forward to tomorrow. I'll pick you up at 3. Clara smiled, a sense of calm settling over her. She wasn't walking into Elliot's wedding as a scorned ex-wife. She was walking in as Clara Bennett, strong, successful, and unshakable. The chapter closes with Clara standing before her bedroom mirror, holding her head high as she whispers to herself, "This time, I'm writing my own story." This chapter builds the emotional tension and sets the stage for the dramatic confrontation to come, while delving into Clara's motivations and preparations in vivid, realistic detail. The morning of the wedding dawned with a pale, wintry sun breaking through the clouds. Clara stood at her bedroom window, gazing out over the Manhattan skyline. The city pulsed with its usual energy, but for Clara, time seemed to have slowed. Today wasn't just another day, it was a moment she had been building toward since the day she signed her divorce papers. Her thoughts were interrupted by the doorbell's chime. Clara walked to the door and opened it to find Naomi standing there, holding 2 coffee cups and a mischievous grin. "Thought you might need a caffeine boost," Naomi said, stepping inside. She handed Clara a blue-bottle coffee cup, setting her oversized tote on the entryway bench. "You know me too well," Clara said, taking a sip and sighing. The warmth of the coffee settled her nerves, if only slightly. Naomi surveyed the apartment, her sharp eyes catching the crimson gown draped carefully over a chair. "Wow," she said, running her fingers lightly over the intricate beadwork. "This is a statement. You're going to turn heads." "That's the idea," Clara replied with a wry smile. "But it's not just about appearances. It's about showing myself that I'm not afraid of the past." Naomi nodded, her expression softening. "You've come so far, Clara. Just remember, this day isn't about him. It's about you." By mid-afternoon, Clara was ready. She stepped into the heels, feeling a surge of confidence as she smoothed down the fabric of the gown. Naomi had left earlier, promising to text updates from the venue. Clara's phone buzzed with a message from James Gallagher. "James, outside whenever you're ready. Take your time, no rush." Clara glanced at herself in the mirror one last time. Her makeup was flawless, a blend of subtle glamour that enhanced her natural beauty. Her hair, styled in soft waves, cascaded over one shoulder. She wasn't just dressed for a wedding, she was dressed for battle. Downstairs, James waited beside his sleek black Mercedes Maybach, looking as polished as ever in a tailored midnight blue suit. He greeted her with a warm smile, his eyes lingering on her as she approached. "Clara," he said, his voice low and admiring, "you look stunning." "Thank you," she replied, a hint of a blush warming her cheeks. "You're not so bad yourself." As they drove toward the venue, James kept the conversation light, sensing her underlying tension. When they pulled up to the Pierre Hotel, its iconic Beaux-Arts facade glimmering in the afternoon light, Clara took a deep breath. "You ready?" James asked, offering her his arm. "Ready as I'll ever be," Clara replied, taking it. The grand ballroom of the Pierre was a vision of opulence. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, and the scent of white roses filled the air. Guests mingled, their laughter and conversation blending into a symphony of wealth and privilege. Clara scanned the room, her gaze landing on Elliot almost immediately. He stood near the front of the room, impeccably dressed in a tailored black tuxedo. His dark hair was neatly styled, and his confident posture exuded the arrogance she remembered all too well. Beside him was Sophia, radiant in a gown adorned with Swarovski crystals, her laughter bright but hollow. Clara felt James's reassuring hand on the small of her back as they entered. The room seemed to shift as guests noticed them, whispers spreading like wildfire. Clara Bennett, the ex-wife, had arrived, and she wasn't alone. Elliot's eyes found hers, and for a brief moment his polished facade faltered. He recovered quickly, but Clara caught the flicker of surprise, and something deeper, something almost like regret. Sophia turned, her expression slipping into something closer to irritation than welcome. She whispered something to Elliot, who gave a tight-lipped response before excusing himself and making his way toward Clara. "Clara," Elliot said, his tone carefully neutral. His gaze flicked to James, who stood beside her like a sentinel. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "I wasn't sure I would either," Clara replied smoothly, "but I figured why not? It's not every day you get to see an ex remarry." Elliot chuckled, though the sound lacked humor. "Well, I'm glad you're here. I hope you'll enjoy the evening." James extended a hand, his voice polite but firm. "James Gallagher, Clara's date for the evening." Elliot's expression tightened as he shook James's hand. "Of course, I've heard of you. A rival in the energy sector, if I'm not mistaken." "Competitor," James corrected with a faint smile. "Rivalry implies I'm chasing something. I prefer to stay ahead." The tension between the two men was palpable, but Clara didn't flinch. Instead, she met Elliot's gaze, her voice calm. "You've done well for yourself, Elliot. Congratulations on everything." Elliot opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, a commotion at the other end of the room drew their attention. Sophia had spilled a glass of champagne, her frustration visible as she waved over a server. The moment broke whatever hold Elliot had on the conversation, and Clara turned away, her heart steady. As the evening progressed, Clara found herself approached by several guests, many of whom expressed admiration for her work with Bright Horizons. One guest, an older woman in an elegant emerald gown, took Clara's hand and whispered, "You're the real success story in this room, my dear. Don't ever forget that." Clara smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. She had expected this night to test her resilience, but instead it was reaffirming her worth. Elliot watched from across the room, his expression unreadable. For the first time, he saw Clara not as the woman he had left behind, but as someone who had transcended him entirely. Clara stepping onto the dance floor with James, her laughter light and genuine. As the music swirled around them, she felt something she hadn't in years: freedom. The evening unfolded in a rhythm of toasts, laughter, and clinking glasses, but for Clara it felt like moving through a carefully choreographed play where everyone wore a mask. The grandeur of the event, the shimmering chandeliers, the meticulously arranged white roses, and the glittering attire of the guests only heightened the feeling of artificiality. She couldn't shake the sensation that every glance in her direction carried a whispered question or an unspoken judgment. Standing near the edge of the ballroom, Clara sipped her champagne, the cool liquid grounding her. Beside her, James was effortlessly charming a small circle of guests, weaving humor and wit into their conversation. His presence was a steadying force, but Clara's mind kept drifting to Elliot. She hadn't missed the flicker of something in his eyes when they first saw each other. Regret? Jealousy? It didn't matter, not anymore, or so she told herself. Clara Bennett. The voice was smooth, practiced, and unmistakably familiar. Clara turned to find Elliot standing a few feet away, holding a glass of bourbon. His expression was unreadable, but his posture carried the confidence of a man used to commanding attention. "Elliot," she replied, her voice calm. "Enjoying your big day?" He smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "It's been a memorable evening. I wasn't expecting you to come." "You invited me," Clara pointed out. "What kind of guest would I be if I ignored such a thoughtful gesture?" His lips quirked in what might have been amusement. "Touché. I'm curious, though. What made you accept?" Clara considered her response. She could have chosen something polite, deflective, but she decided on honesty instead. "To remind myself that I've moved on, and to see if you have." Elliot's smile faltered, just for a moment. He swirled the bourbon in his glass, his gaze dropping to the amber liquid. "I see you've brought quite the date. James Gallagher, of all people. Strategic choice?" Clara raised an eyebrow. "He's a friend, Elliot. Not everything is a calculated move." "Isn't it?" he countered, his tone softer now, almost introspective. "We both know how this world works." She tilted her head, studying him. There was something different about him tonight, a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. But before she could respond, the band struck up a lively tune, and Sophia appeared at Elliot's side, her smile tight. "There you are," Sophia said, looping her arm through his. Her gaze flicked to Clara, cool and assessing. "Clara, I'm so glad you could make it. You've certainly been the topic of conversation." Clara met her gaze evenly. "I imagine I have." Sophia's smile widened, though it didn't soften. "Elliot mentioned you're running a non-profit now. Bright Horizons, was it?" "Such noble work." "Yes," Clara replied, her voice steady. "It's been incredibly fulfilling. Helping others has a way of putting things into perspective." Sophia's expression wavered, just for a moment, before she recovered. "How wonderful. We should talk more sometime. I've been considering starting a foundation of my own." Clara smiled, her tone measured. "I'd be happy to share some insights, though I should warn you, it takes more than a name and a checkbook." The subtle barb wasn't lost on Sophia, whose grip on Elliot's arm tightened. "Excuse us," she said with a strained laugh. "We need to check on a few things." Elliot hesitated, his eyes lingering on Clara for a moment, before letting Sophia lead him away. Clara exhaled, the tension ebbing as they disappeared into the crowd. Later that evening, Clara found herself on the balcony, the cool night air, a welcome reprieve from the heat of the ballroom. The city stretched out before her, its lights shimmering like a sea of stars. She leaned against the railing, letting the quiet soothe her. "You were always good at making an exit." Elliot's voice broke the silence. Clara didn't turn, keeping her gaze on the skyline. "Some things never change." He stepped beside her, the faint scent of bourbon and cedarwood cologne wafting in the breeze. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. "I wanted to thank you," Elliot said finally. "For what?" "For coming, for showing me." He trailed off, his voice thick with something Clara couldn't quite place. "For showing me that you're stronger than I ever gave you credit for." Clara turned to face him, her expression guarded. "Elliot, you don't need to say these things. It's your wedding day." "That's just it," he said, his voice low. "This day, this whole life I've built, it's everything I thought I wanted. But seeing you tonight, hearing people talk about what you've done, I realize something. You found meaning, purpose. I've been chasing, I don't even know what anymore." Clara's heart tightened, but she held her ground. "You made your choices, Elliot, and I made mine. I'm proud of the woman I've become." He nodded, his gaze dropping. "You should be." For a moment, They were just two people standing under the stars, the noise of the world fading into the background. Clara felt a pang of sadness for what they had lost, but also a deep sense of gratitude for what she had gained. "I wish you happiness, Elliot," she said softly. "I truly do." He looked at her, his eyes filled with a mix of regret and something that might have been admiration. "And I wish I had been the man you deserved." As Clara walked back into the ballroom, she felt lighter, as though she had finally set down a burden she hadn't realized she was carrying. James was waiting for her, his smile warm and steady. "Everything okay?" he asked, offering her his hand. "More than okay," Clara replied, taking it. They stepped onto the dance floor, the music swelling around them. For the first time in years, Clara felt a profound sense of closure and the freedom to embrace whatever came next. The reception was winding down, the grandeur of the event now muted by the subtle fatigue of its guests. Clara could feel the shift in the atmosphere. The bursts of laughter had softened into murmurs. The lively music had given way to slower, more reflective melodies. She stood near the edge of the ballroom, a glass of champagne in her hand, observing the room with a sense of quiet satisfaction. She wasn't a participant in this spectacle anymore. She was an observer, a woman who had come to witness the end of one chapter and the beginning of another, not for Elliot, but for herself. As Clara considered slipping away, Elliot approached her one final time. His bow tie was slightly loosened, and the sharp edges of his demeanor had softened, replaced by something more vulnerable. He gestured toward the quieter corner of the room, where they could speak without interruption. "I wanted to catch you before you left," he began, his voice lower than before, tinged with exhaustion. Clara raised an eyebrow but followed him, curiosity mingled with the lingering sense of closure she had found on the balcony. "What is it, Elliot?" she asked, her tone measured but not unkind. He hesitated, running a hand through his dark hair. "I've been thinking a lot tonight, about us, about what I let slip away." He looked up at her, and for a moment the polished businessman was gone, replaced by the young man she had fallen in love with all those years ago. "I never said it back then, but I'm sorry, Clara. For everything. For the way I treated you, for not appreciating what we had." Clara felt a pang in her chest, not of longing, but of bittersweet acknowledgement. "I've forgiven you, Elliot," she said softly. "I forgave you a long time ago. Not for your sake, but for mine. Carrying that weight wasn't helping me, it was holding me back." He nodded slowly, his eyes searching hers. "You're incredible, you know that. The things you've accomplished, the way people talk about you tonight. You've become everything I thought I was chasing, but I see now it wasn't about the success. It was about the person behind it." Clara gave him a small smile, the kind that held a world of understanding. "We both had to grow in different ways, Elliot. What we had, it taught me strength, resilience, and it taught me to believe in myself. I wouldn't trade those lessons for anything." He took a deep breath, as if letting go of something he'd held on to for too long. "Thank you, Clara, for being here, for everything. I hope you find the happiness you deserve." "I already have," she replied, her voice steady. "I hope you find it too." They parted with a handshake that felt more like a truce, a final closing of the door on their shared history. As Clara watched him return to the party, she felt no sadness, no regret, only peace. James found her soon after, his presence as grounding as ever. "Everything okay?" he asked, his tone gentle but inquisitive. "Better than okay," Clara replied, slipping her arm through his. "It feels like a weight has been lifted." He smiled, nodding toward the exit. "Shall we?" As they left the ballroom, the cool night air greeted them, crisp and refreshing after the heat and noise of the reception. The city lights stretched out before them, vibrant and alive, a reminder that life always moved forward. They walked in companionable silence to the waiting car, the hum of the engine blending with the distant sounds of New York. Clara leaned her head against the cool glass of the window, her thoughts quiet but content. The next morning, Clara sat at her desk, a steaming cup of tea beside her. The sunlight streamed through the windows of her apartment, bathing the room in a warm glow. She opened her laptop and pulled up the draft of her latest article, a personal essay for a prominent magazine that had asked her to write about resilience and reinvention. The words flowed easily now, no longer tinged with the bitterness or uncertainty that had colored her earlier drafts. She wrote about loss and growth, about the unexpected beauty of finding oneself after a storm. And as she typed the final sentences, she realized how far she had come. Later that day, her phone buzzed with a text from Elliot. It was a short message, uncharacteristically simple. "Thank you for coming last night. Seeing you reminded me of what really matters. I hope our paths cross again someday." Clara read the message twice, then smiled before setting her phone down. She didn't feel the need to reply. The conversation they had shared the night before was enough. Weeks later, Clara found herself standing in the lobby of a Manhattan hotel, waiting for James. They were heading to a gala for Bright Horizons, a celebration of the organization's latest achievements. When he arrived, his smile was warm and his hand steady as he led her toward the waiting car. "You ready for another big night?" he teased. "Always," Clara replied, her confidence unshakable. As they drove through the bustling streets of New York, Clara looked out at the city she had come to love so deeply. She thought of the journey that had brought her here, of the woman she had become through struggle, growth, and rediscovery. The chapter ends with Clara stepping out of the car at the gala, her head held high, ready to embrace the next chapter of her life, not as someone defined by her past, but as the author of her own story. The weeks following Elliot's wedding were a time of reflection and quiet transformation for Clara. Each day seemed to carry her further from the shadow of her past and deeper into the light of the life she had built. Her work with Bright Horizons thrived, her personal relationships grew richer, and the weight she hadn't realized she was carrying finally lifted. But this journey wasn't without its pivotal moments, each one a reminder of how far she had come and where she was going. It began with a simple errand. Clara was walking through the Strand bookstore, one of her favorite places in New York City, searching for a first edition to gift a friend. The scent of old paper and the quiet hum of readers flipping pages filled the air, a soothing backdrop to her thoughts. As she browsed the shelves, she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Clara?" She turned and froze. Standing just a few feet away was Sophia Reed, Elliot's new wife. Sophia was impeccably dressed, her coat cinched perfectly at the waist, her makeup flawless. But there was an edge to her expression, a crack in her polished demeanor. "Sophia," Clara said, her voice calm but curious. "This is unexpected." Sophia's smile was tight. "I thought so too, but I couldn't let the moment pass. I wanted to apologize." The words hung in the air, unexpected and heavy. Clara arched an eyebrow, but said nothing, letting Sophia continue. "I know how I came across at the wedding," Sophia said, her gaze dropping momentarily. "I was threatened, insecure. You walked in with all this presence, and I felt small. I'm not proud of how I acted." Clara studied her for a moment before replying. "It takes courage to admit that. I appreciate your honesty." Sophia sighed, a hint of vulnerability breaking through. "For what it's worth, I think Elliot realized something that night. He hasn't said much, but there's been a shift. I think seeing you made him reflect on the choices he's made." Clara nodded, a flicker of sympathy passing through her. "We all grow in our own time. I hope you find what you're looking for, Sophia." Sophia looked at her, something close to gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you. And congratulations, by the way, on everything." As Sophia walked away, Clara felt an odd sense of closure, not just with Elliot, but with the entire chapter of her life that had revolved around him. The annual gala for Bright Horizons was one of the biggest nights of the year. Held at the elegant Cipriani Wall Street, the event drew philanthropists, corporate leaders, and public figures eager to support the cause of literacy and education. Clara arrived with James, her crimson gown from Christian Siriano, drawing admiring glances. The evening was a whirlwind of speeches, networking, and heartfelt moments. But the highlight came when Clara was called to the stage to accept an award for her contributions to social impact. Standing at the podium, Clara looked out at the sea of faces. "Thank you," she began, her voice steady. "This recognition isn't just for me, it's for the team that makes Bright Horizons possible, and for every child whose life has been touched by the power of education." She paused, her eyes scanning the crowd. "There was a time when I doubted my ability to create something meaningful, when I felt defined by someone else's vision of success. But what I've learned is that true fulfillment comes from embracing your own path, no matter how uncertain it may seem." The applause that followed was thunderous. James met her at the base of the stage, his smile warm and proud. "You were incredible," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. Clara felt a deep sense of accomplishment, not just for the award, but for the journey it represented. She had stepped out of someone else's shadow and built a legacy of her own. A few days after the gala, Clara received a package in the mail. The handwriting on the envelope was familiar. It was from Elliot. She hesitated for a moment before opening it, her curiosity piqued. Inside was a handwritten letter and a small leather-bound notebook. The letter was brief, but heartfelt. "Clara, I saw the news about the gala and the award. Congratulations. I can't think of anyone who deserves it more. I've been reflecting a lot since the wedding, and I realized there's something I needed to do. Enclosed is the notebook where I used to jot down my ideas during our early days at Boston University. Many of those ideas became the foundation for Grayson Enterprises, but I never acknowledged how much of that journey was shaped by your support, your belief in me. I want you to have it as a reminder that your impact has always been greater than you realized. Wishing you all the happiness in the world." Elliot. Clara traced her fingers over the cover of the notebook, memories flooding back. She felt no longing, only gratitude, for the clarity, the growth, and the life she had now. One evening, as Clara and James walked along the High Line, the city lights twinkling around them, James spoke with a rare seriousness. "You've been through so much," he said, taking her hand. "But it's clear you're not just surviving, you're thriving. I'm lucky to be part of your world." Clara smiled, squeezing his hand. "And I'm lucky to have you in mine." Their steps slowed as they reached the edge of the park. Clara looked out at the skyline, feeling the weight of the past lift completely. She had faced the ghosts of her old life, and now she stood on the precipice of a future defined by her own terms. The chapter ends with Clara resting her head on James's shoulder, the city stretching out before them as a symbol of endless possibility. Chapter 7. Writing her own story. The early spring sun bathed New York City in a golden light, its warmth a promise of renewal. Clara stood on the balcony of her Brooklyn Heights apartment, a cup of tea cradled in her hands. Below, the world bustled with its usual energy, but Clara felt a rare sense of calm, as if the city itself had paused to reflect alongside her. She had spent the morning organizing her workspace, finally deciding to frame the letter and notebook Elliot had sent. They weren't tokens of love or longing, but symbols of the growth and clarity she had gained. Her office now held the physical reminders of her journey, a framed photo of her first literacy program ribbon cutting, awards recognizing her nonprofit's impact, and a growing pile of drafts for a memoir she had tentatively titled Finding Horizons. Later that day, Clara sat in a boardroom at the Penguin Random House offices. She had been invited to discuss her memoir with their editorial team, who had taken an interest in her story after her gala speech had gone viral. The editor-in-chief, a poised woman named Rachel Hargrove, leaned forward with a smile. Clara, your story resonates deeply, not just the professional success, but the personal resilience. It's rare to find someone who can inspire with such authenticity. I think Finding Horizons has the potential to reach a wide audience. Clara smiled, humbled by the praise. I've always believed in the power of stories to connect us. If sharing mine can help others find their strength, then it's worth every vulnerable moment. As they discussed the book's direction, Clara felt a spark of excitement she hadn't experienced in years. This wasn't just about sharing her past. It was about reclaiming her narrative and giving it a purpose beyond herself. A few weeks later, Clara hosted a private dinner at Le Bernardin, one of her favorite restaurants, to celebrate the formal launch of her memoir project. Naomi and James were there, along with key members of the Bright Horizons team. It was an intimate gathering, but every guest had played a significant role in Clara's journey. Naomi, ever the life of the party, raised a glass. To Clara, who's proven that strength doesn't come from never falling, but from rising every time. And to her memoir, which I know will inspire millions. The room erupted in cheers and laughter, and Clara felt a lump rise in her throat. "Thank you," she said, standing to address the group. "I wouldn't be here without each of you. You've reminded me that life isn't about the plans we make or the setbacks we face. It's about the people who walk beside us." The following morning, Clara received an unexpected email from Elliot. The subject line was simple: "Thank you. Clara, I read about your memoir project, and I just wanted to say how proud I am of you. I've started my own journey of reflection, and I've realized how much I can learn from the way you've faced your challenges with grace. I'm also making changes in my life. I've begun mentoring young entrepreneurs, hoping to pass on lessons I wish I'd learned earlier. I owe much of that inspiration to you. Wishing you all the best in this new chapter." Clara read the message twice before closing her laptop. It was strange how life had a way of circling back, offering closure when you least expected it. On a bright Saturday morning, Clara and James drove to the Catskills for a weekend retreat. It was their first real getaway together, a chance to step back from their busy lives and simply be present with one another. As they walked along a forest trail, the sun filtering through the trees, Clara felt a deep sense of peace. James reached for her hand, and she smiled up at him. "You're quiet today," he said gently. "What's on your mind?" "Just thinking about how far I've come," she replied. "For so long, I let myself believe I was defined by what I'd lost. But now I see that every step, even the painful ones, brought me to where I'm meant to be." James stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression soft. "And where is that?" "Here," Clara said, gesturing to the world around them. "Living fully, without fear of the past. Writing my own story." He leaned down and kissed her, the moment filled with the quiet joy of shared understanding. As they continued down the trail, the trees opened up to reveal a breathtaking view of the valley below. Clara paused, taking it all in, the endless horizon stretching before her. For the first time in years, she didn't just feel like a woman who had overcome her past, she felt like a woman who had embraced her future. Back in her Brooklyn apartment, Clara typed the final sentence of the first chapter of her memoir. "The most important journey isn't the one that takes you somewhere new. It's the one that brings you back to yourself." She leaned back, a contented smile on her lips. Her story wasn't over, but she knew now that she was the one holding the pen. The novel ends with Clara gazing out at the city skyline, the soft glow of her desk lamp illuminating her face. Her story was just beginning, and the horizon was limitless. Clara closed her laptop and stood by the large window in her Brooklyn Heights apartment. The city skyline stretched before her, bathed in the golden hues of the setting sun. She held a cup of tea, her thoughts calm and content. Her journey had been anything but simple, filled with twists, losses, and rediscoveries. But as she stood there, she knew one thing for certain. Life wasn't about waiting for the perfect moment. It was about learning to create those moments, to embrace every high and low, and to keep moving forward with resilience and authenticity. Clara turned, her smile radiant, as if addressing a larger audience beyond the city's glow. If Clara's story inspired you, if it reminded you to embrace your own journey, no matter how challenging, then there's so much more we can share together. Stories have the power to heal, to connect, and to ignite something within us all. Hit that subscribe button now to join a community that believes in resilience, growth, and the beauty of second chances. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder that they hold the pen to their own life. Let's keep writing, keep growing, and keep inspiring each other. Together, we'll create stories that change the world. The screen fades to black, but the faint echo of Clara's words lingers, because the best is always yet to come.
Pregnant wife caught her millionaire husband entering a hotel with mistress. The truth shocked everyone. Lauren Donovan had always believed she'd married the perfect man. Henry Donovan was not just any husband, he was wealthy, generous and charming, with a kind of mesmerizing smile that made even strangers feel at ease. Their life seemed picture perfect, a gorgeous house, a flourishing network of friends, and a supportive family. Yet beneath the glossy veneer, Lauren sensed an invisible tension, the faintest crack in their shimmering world. She'd been trying to ignore it, to trust the man who'd swept her off her feet. But one fateful night outside a luxurious hotel, she discovered Henry's secret, and it was nothing she'd ever imagined. Lauren Donovan woke up in her plush, king-sized bed and listened to the stillness of the morning. Thick blackout curtains dimmed the streaming sunlight. She stretched her limbs and exhaled deeply, mentally preparing herself for another day in the orbit of her husband, millionaire entrepreneur Henry Donovan. The faint hum of the air conditioner accompanied the sound of her heartbeat, an involuntary reminder that life in the Donovan household was rarely calm these days, no matter how it seemed on the surface. She rose quietly, slipped into a soft satin robe, and peeked out the window. Their estate sprawled over several acres of manicured gardens, a shining swimming pool, and tall hedges that protected them from the outside world. Once upon a time, this private sanctuary felt like a cradle of love and security. But over the past few months, an intangible distance had grown between her and Henry. At first, she chalked it up to the usual stresses of running a multi-million-dollar real estate company. Henry's company, Donovan and Finch, had become a major player in the market. Such success often demanded relentless work and plenty of sacrifices. Lauren's mind drifted to a conversation she'd had with her dear friend Rachel Morgan, a savvy stockbroker who had been the one to introduce them in the first place. Rachel had teased Lauren that men like Henry rarely come without baggage, but Lauren, smitten and starry-eyed, had dismissed any warnings. In Henry, she saw ambition, generosity, and a gentleness that belied his commanding presence in the business world. Now, she felt silly for brushing off any cautionary tales. Lately, Henry had been withdrawn. His phone buzzed at odd hours. He'd disappear into his study for late-night conference calls, offering only vague explanations. He seemed to carry burdens that he refused to share. In the mornings, a haunted look flickered behind his eyes, as if he was battling ghosts only he could see. Her hand strayed to her phone on the bedside table. She wondered if maybe she should talk to Rachel again. But before she could decide, the device vibrated with an incoming message. It was from Henry, who was already out of the house, heading out early for an important meeting. Might not be back until late. Don't wait up. Lauren's heart twisted. He'd left without even telling her goodbye. Again, with a growing heaviness in her chest, she made her way downstairs, determined to fill her day with anything that could distract from the mounting suspicion tugging at her mind. Whatever was happening with Henry, she had to believe they could still talk it through if only he'd let her in. Lauren tried her best to go about her day normally. She attended a charity luncheon at the upscale Crestbourne Country Club, a routine event she and Henry usually attended together. But Henry had been missing from such gatherings for months now. At the luncheon, she was surrounded by the social elite women in finely tailored dresses who breezed through conversations about philanthropic causes, international travel, and children's accomplishments. As she sipped on freshly squeezed orange juice, Lauren felt a swirl of unease. Conversations around her blurred as she faked a polite smile. Occasionally, she caught a pitying glance from one of the other wives. She overheard hushed whispers. Henry Donovan's been so absent from the scene. Maybe he's in trouble with his new development. Could be. A man that rich always has secrets. Lauren's cheeks burned. She forced herself to keep her composure, but inside, her worst fears were being stoked by careless gossip. Rachel Morgan, who had arrived late, noticed Lauren's tension immediately. After the luncheon ended, Rachel pulled her aside. "Lauren, are you okay? You seem out of sorts," Rachel asked, gently pressing a hand on Lauren's arm. Lauren opened her mouth, but she couldn't find the words to explain what she herself didn't fully understand. "He's just been distant," she said, trying to stop her eyes from watering. "Busy, I guess. But it feels different, like something is off." Rachel frowned, glancing around to make sure they wouldn't be overheard. "Have you talked to him? Really sat down and asked him what's going on?" Lauren grimaced. "He doesn't seem to have time to talk. And when he does talk, he insists everything is fine, just business stress. But I found this note in his pocket the other day, some scribbled message about a rendezvous at the Montgomery Hotel. He brushed it off as a business meeting. But why not just say, it's a meeting with so-and-so? Why so secretive?" Rachel's eyes widened at the mention of the Montgomery Hotel, a known luxury spot for clandestine affairs and big money deals. "You should be careful, Lauren. If Henry is, well, if there's more going on, you have a right to know. Men like him, they can get caught up in all kinds of things." Lauren looked at her friend, torn between wanting to trust Henry and fearing the unknown. "I just don't want to jump to conclusions," she whispered, "but I don't know how to handle this." Rachel squeezed her arm. "I'm here. Whatever you need." The conversation played on repeat in Lauren's head as she drove away from the country club. Seeds of doubt had taken root, and no matter how she tried to drown them in logic or trust, they kept sprouting ominously. She had no idea that those seeds would soon flourish into a storm that would uproot everything she believed about her husband and her marriage. Later that evening, Lauren found herself alone in the imposing Donovan mansion. The quietness felt heavy, broken only by the steady ticking of the antique grandfather clock in the hallway. She tried distracting herself with a novel, but she couldn't concentrate. The words blurred on the page, overshadowed by her anxieties about Henry. Where was he? Why was he being so elusive? Around midnight, she heard the hum of Henry's Mercedes pulling into the driveway. She rushed to the window and saw him step out of the car. His posture was tense. He looked over his shoulder before hurrying inside. Something about the way he carried himself, guarded, cautious, made her stomach twist. Lauren stood by the living room fireplace, arms folded, waiting for him. When he entered, she noticed the faint smell of perfume that wasn't hers. Henry's tie was askew, and his eyes darted around as if he were afraid of being watched. "Henry?" she asked softly, her voice trembling with a mix of concern and accusation. "Is everything all right?" He froze, clearly not expecting her to be awake. "Lauren, you're still up." "Hard to sleep when my husband barely comes home," she replied, trying to maintain composure but unable to keep the edge out of her voice. "Where have you been?" He hesitated for an instant before regaining his usual calm. "I had a meeting with some out-of-town investors, then dinner went late." He shrugged off his coat, avoiding eye contact. "I didn't want to wake you." Lauren stared at him. "Henry, we need to talk." He finally met her gaze, and for a moment she thought she saw a flicker of guilt. Then he nodded. "Yes, we do." But just as her heart quickened, waiting for him to confess, or at least elaborate on what was really going on, he added, "Let's talk tomorrow. I'm exhausted." Without giving her a chance to protest, he strode past her, heading for the stairs. She stood there, heart pounding, the haunting feeling that something was profoundly wrong only intensified. That night, sleep was an impossible companion. She stared at the ceiling, wondering about the faint perfume on his jacket, the tension in his shoulders, and the secrets behind his distant eyes. If only she had known how quickly those secrets would unravel and how drastically they would change her life. In the days that followed, Lauren tried to pry answers from Henry in a gentle but firm way. He continued to wave her off. His schedule was busier than ever, his phone constantly buzzing. At one point, she picked up his phone from the dining table to hand it to him, and he nearly lunged to grab it from her. The sting of suspicion turned into an ache that wouldn't leave her. Just when she thought she might burst from uncertainty, she found a small piece of paper in his study while tidying up. On it was scribbled, "Montgomery Hotel, room 507, 8 p.m. She blinked, her hand beginning to shake. The Montgomery Hotel? The same place she'd overheard other wives gossiping about, the same note in Henry's pocket days before. That night's date was circled in thick pen, and that night was today. Her heart hammered in her chest. No more waiting for him to confess. She needed to see for herself. She quickly called Rachel, voice quivering. "I found a meeting note. Tonight, Montgomery Hotel, room 507. I can't just sit here." Rachel's immediate response was concerned but supportive. "Lauren, do you really want to do this? It could be anything, but if you're that worried, maybe you should go. I can come with you for moral support." Lauren exhaled heavily, torn between fear of facing the truth and desperation for answers. "Yes, please. Thank you." By 7:30 p.m., Lauren was driving her sleek black SUV toward the Montgomery Hotel, Rachel in the passenger seat. The glitzy skyline framed their tense silence. Rachel's presence was reassuring, but it couldn't quench the dread coiling in Lauren's stomach. She was about to spy on her own husband, something she'd never imagined doing in a million years. They arrived at the hotel and parked discreetly. The lobby was golden and opulent, with chandeliers and marble floors that gleamed under warm lights. Lauren's chest was tight with anxiety. They rode the elevator to the 5th floor in silence, hearts pounding in unison. At room 507, Lauren stood outside, listening. She heard low murmuring inside, but couldn't make out the words. Her heart hammered so loudly she was sure Rachel could hear it. Then the voices grew louder. Without a second thought, Lauren gripped the doorknob. To her surprise, it turned. She burst in, Rachel right behind her, and found Henry standing there, with a striking brunette in a figure hugging black dress. The woman froze, eyes wide. Henry spun around, looking like he'd seen a ghost. A single moment of dreadful stillness passed. Then Lauren's voice cracked the silence. "Henry, what is going on? Who is she?" Henry's expression flickered between shock, panic, and something that might have been shame. The woman stared, lips parted, but speechless. Lauren's knees threatened to give out beneath her. She had caught him red-handed, or so she believed. In that agonizing moment, every assumption, every fear filled her mind with white-hot intensity. This was it, the nightmare she had dreaded for months. But the truth would prove to be far more complicated than she could ever have imagined. Lauren's heart pounded so violently that she could barely hear over the roar of blood in her ears. Henry's face had lost its color. The brunette stood next to him, looking like she might bolt at any moment. "I'm waiting," Lauren said, her voice shaking. "Who is she, Henry?" Henry opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He glanced at the woman for a fleeting moment, then back to his wife. When he finally spoke, his words were halting, as though he was trying to piece together a puzzle while caught in a web of lies. "Lauren, It's not what it looks like. A bitter laugh escaped Lauren's lips. Really, Henry? Then please enlighten me, because it sure looks like you're here, in a hotel room with another woman. Rachel, standing behind Lauren, shot a glare at Henry. She looked ready to jump to Lauren's defense if he tried to spin some unbelievable story. The brunette let out a shaky breath. "Maybe I should go," she murmured, edging toward the door. "Stay," Lauren commanded, surprising herself with the assertiveness in her voice. She needed to hear some kind of explanation, no matter how far-fetched. "I want answers, now." Henry lifted his hand as if to touch Lauren's arm, but she pulled away, glaring at him. "I swear, this isn't an affair," he insisted. "Caroline and I—" "Caroline," Lauren repeated, letting the name drape in icy contempt. "So you know her quite well?" "Lauren, listen to me," Henry said, voice pleading. He looked over at Caroline, who nodded subtly, as though giving him permission to speak. "Caroline is a private investigator." A disbelieving silence filled the room. Rachel's eyebrows shot up, and Lauren found herself momentarily speechless. She had expected Henry to come up with some kind of excuse. But this? A private investigator? "Why would you be meeting with a private investigator in a hotel room?" Lauren asked, suspicion still dripping from every word. Caroline, whose posture had been tense, cleared her throat. "Henry hired me to look into some issues he's been having with a business partner. It's sensitive. We chose this hotel room for confidentiality. We had to meet here to avoid prying eyes. Henry was adamant about keeping it secret from everyone, even you." A swirl of confusion took hold of Lauren. Was he telling the truth? Or was this just a clever alibi? Henry took a step closer, eyes searching hers. "I didn't want to involve you, Lauren, because it's dangerous," he said, desperation creeping into his tone. "We've been getting threats, blackmail letters. Someone wants to destroy Donovan and Finch. I didn't want you in harm's way." Lauren looked from Henry to Caroline, then back again. The anger in her veins clashed with a flicker of concern for her husband. Threats? Blackmail? "Why didn't you just tell me? You know I'd support you no matter what." Henry ran a shaky hand through his hair. "I thought I was protecting you. I thought if I kept you away from this, you'd be safe." Caroline picked up a small stack of papers from the bed. "This is evidence we've compiled. Someone is funneling money through Henry's company to make it look like he's engaged in fraud. We're trying to trace it back to the source." Lauren stared at the documents. Part of her yearned to believe Henry wholeheartedly, but the damage done by her suspicion and his secrecy wasn't that easy to erase. "Why the secrecy to the point of almost losing me?" she asked, voice trembling. Henry's face contorted with guilt. "I never wanted it to go this far. I'd do anything to keep you safe, even if it meant destroying your trust in me. He couldn't finish, and Lauren felt the tears burning in her eyes. This was not the resolution she'd expected. She had barged in, ready to uncover a filthy affair, only to stumble upon something else entirely a covert operation. Blackmail, and a world of secrets designed, Henry claimed, to keep her out of danger. But even as relief mingled with regret, she couldn't ignore the doubt that still gnawed at her. The seeds of mistrust had been planted, and it would take more than an impromptu confession to uproot them. The story was far from over. The hush of Montgomery Hotel's corridor enveloped the four of them as they stood in uneasy silence. Caroline placed the documents back on the bed, glancing uncertainly at Lauren. "I understand this is a shock," she said in a subdued tone. "If you want proof of my credentials, I can provide them." Lauren rubbed her temples, wishing she could vanish into thin air. She didn't know Caroline, had never heard the name until tonight, but the desperation in Henry's voice, coupled with Caroline's professional demeanor, made her hesitate. Could Henry really be telling the truth? Rachel, who had quietly observed the entire confrontation, finally spoke. "Lauren, maybe we should at least look at what they've gathered. It might help clarify things." Slowly, Lauren walked to the bed, picking up the first page of the stack. It was a photograph of Henry leaving his office, a tall, well-dressed man in sunglasses trailing behind him. Notes scrawled on the back mentioned dates, times, and suspected involvement in the financial irregularities at Donovan and Finch. "Gareth Fitzpatrick," Henry said, pointing to the photo. "He's our CFO. Caroline found evidence that he's been siphoning money, forging my signature on documents, orchestrating deals with outside shell companies. But the worst part is that he's framing me for it. If it all comes crashing down, I'll be the one carrying the blame for embezzlement." Lauren's stomach churned. If Fitzpatrick was truly behind this, it meant that Henry, the man she still loved, had been a victim, not a villain. The secret meetings with Caroline started to make sense. But still, the idea of Henry lying to her, even if it was for what he believed to be a noble reason, gnawed at her heart. She flipped through more documents, each one revealing a tangled web of transactions, forged letters and threatening notes. Some were chilling in their bluntness, "Keep your mouth shut or else." Others were more cryptic but no less ominous. Caroline's voice was calm but resolute. "I've been tailing Fitzpatrick. We have partial evidence that he's connected to some organized groups who see Donovan and Finch as an easy target. They want to launder money or profit from your downfall. Henry has been trying to gather enough proof to stop him before it's too late." Lauren shook her head, stepping back as if the papers themselves might burn her. "You should have come to me, Henry. This is our life, our marriage. How could you think shutting me out would be okay?" Henry reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Sometimes protecting someone means doing things you hate. I couldn't risk you getting involved in criminal matters, especially not after I received that anonymous threat about you." Lauren's gaze snapped up. "Threat about me?" Henry nodded, regret heavy in his eyes. "A message arrived at my office, accompanied by a photo of you leaving a boutique downtown. The note said, 'Nice family you got there. Would be a shame if something happened.' After that, I knew I had to do whatever it took to keep you out of the crossfire." Rachel's eyes widened, and Lauren felt her world wobble dangerously. Everything was happening so fast. The terror of a potential threat clashed with the relief that Henry might not be cheating on her. But secrets cut deep, no matter how noble the intentions behind them. Caroline cleared her throat. "Lauren, I don't expect you to forgive Henry overnight, but we truly are working together, and it's for your safety as much as his. What happens next is crucial. We're close to bringing this to the authorities, but we need more evidence." Lauren swallowed hard, leaning against the dresser for support. It was too much to take in at once. For months, her marriage had been suffocating under the weight of unspoken fears. Now, the ugliness of blackmail, fraud, and danger threatened them both. She felt torn between anger, betrayal, and a fierce desire to protect Henry despite it all. She finally steadied her gaze on him. "What do we do now?" Henry and Caroline exchanged a determined glance. "We keep going," Caroline said. "We expose Fitzpatrick, gather conclusive evidence, and ensure that the authorities see the truth before he can strike again." Lauren nodded, even though her heart still ached. She took a trembling breath, wondering if their marriage could ever be the same. In that moment, she realized the affair she had feared was the least of their worries. Something far more sinister was at play, and it would take everything she had to stand by Henry's side. Though the hotel confrontation ended with more questions than answers, Lauren found some relief in the truth, if it was indeed the truth. She and Rachel drove home in tense silence, leaving Henry and Caroline to continue their covert meeting. Lauren had insisted on leaving. She needed space to process the revelations. Back at the Donovan mansion, the weight of the day pressed on her like a crushing boulder. Every corner of the opulent house felt colder, emptier. She retreated into the living room, sinking into the cushions of the sofa where she and Henry once laughed over late-night movies. Now, it felt like a stranger's house. Rachel gently placed a hand on Lauren's shoulder. "I can stay if you want," she offered. Lauren appreciated the kindness in her friend's eyes. "No, it's okay," she murmured. "I need some time alone." "Just thank you for being there." Rachel nodded, understanding. "Call me if you need anything. Promise?" She left, and Lauren found herself alone with her thoughts once more. Sleep was not an option, so she wandered aimlessly, her footsteps echoing in the grand hall. She stopped by Henry's study, running her fingertips over the polished mahogany desk. Stacks of business reports, architectural plans, and financial statements cluttered the surface. She wondered how many times he'd been in here, sifting through evidence, frantic to protect her and their life from a threat she hadn't even known existed. A swirl of guilt mixed with her anger. Yes, Henry had lied. Yes, he'd withheld crucial information, but he'd done it, he claimed, out of love and fear for her safety. It wasn't an affair, which was the darkest betrayal she'd imagined. Yet secrecy, even for noble reasons, could breed its own destructive consequences. Her trust had been shaken, and that was not something she could simply dismiss. She remembered the day Henry proposed, a warm spring afternoon by the lake, a small band playing in the distance. He slipped the ring on her finger, tears in his eyes. He'd whispered, "I promise to protect you and love you, always." Back then, she'd never questioned that vow. Now, she realized that promise could lead people to do the strangest things. It could make a devoted husband choose shadows over transparency. As dawn approached, she finally went to bed. This time, though, she slept in one of the guest rooms, a silent statement that she needed distance. Henry wasn't home yet, and she didn't wait for him. When she woke up, bleary-eyed, a faint light seeped through the curtains. She padded downstairs and found Henry sitting at the kitchen island, nursing a cup of black coffee. His eyes were red-rimmed, as if he hadn't slept. Tension filled the room the moment she stepped in. "Lauren," he said softly, standing up, "I'm sorry if I worried you last night." She stared at him, countless emotions colliding in her mind. "It's going to take time for me to sort this out, Henry," she said finally. He nodded, face etched with remorse. "I understand. Ask me anything and I'll tell you. No more secrets, I promise." She wanted to believe him, but part of her wasn't ready to jump into unconditional trust again. "First, tell me everything you know about these threats. And Gareth Fitzpatrick. I want to hear it from you, not just from Caroline." And so Henry told her, in stilted fragments, about how Gareth had grown close to him over the years, even becoming a confidant. The CFO seemed loyal, brilliant with numbers, and instrumental in Donovan and Finch's meteoric rise. But cracks appeared when Henry spotted discrepancies in the accounts. Tiny sums at first, but they grew larger as he investigated. He confronted Gareth privately, but Gareth brushed it off as trivial anomalies. Then came the blackmail letters, the manipulative attempts to turn the board against Henry. The final straw was the threat involving Lauren. That's when he hired Caroline Price, a private investigator with a sterling reputation for handling corporate corruption. Henry confided he'd been terrified that if the criminals saw him involving his wife, she could become a target. As Henry spoke, Lauren absorbed his words, trying to separate fact from potential fabrication. Yet the trembling in his hands and the hoarseness in his voice painted a picture of genuine fear and regret. When he finished, she sighed. "I believe you," she whispered, though her tone carried caution. "But I'm still hurt." Henry's shoulders sagged. "I know. All I can do is ask for your understanding while we put a stop to this. We're close, Lauren. Caroline's onto something. We just need the final piece of evidence." Lauren looked at the man she married, exhausted and desperate for redemption. "All right," she said quietly. "Let's do this. Together. It was a fragile truce, a sliver of restored unity in the midst of chaos. But it was enough. For now, over the following days, Lauren immersed herself in the whirlwind of Henry's covert operation. They set up a temporary workstation in his study, combing through mountains of data, forging a plan to expose Gareth Fitzpatrick. Caroline visited frequently, her demeanor cool and professional. Despite the tension at first, Lauren found herself growing to appreciate Caroline's meticulous nature. Even Rachel joined in on occasion, offering moral support and a fresh perspective. Lauren felt a strange new purpose coursing through her veins. For so long, she'd been left in the dark, imagining the worst about her husband. Now, she was determined to protect him and their marriage. If Gareth wanted a war, she would stand by Henry's side. Late one afternoon, Caroline sat at the study's antique desk, flipping through a folder of suspicious financial statements. "There's a pattern here," she noted, tapping the pages with a manicured finger. "Look at the dates. The discrepancies spike every time Henry goes on a business trip. It's like Gareth times these transactions when you're out of the office." Henry nodded grimly. "He must think I won't notice when I'm traveling. Or maybe he wants to frame me for deals allegedly made in person somewhere else." Lauren leaned over Caroline's shoulder, examining the spreadsheets. "Can we trace the money flow to a final destination?" Caroline blew out a breath. "Working on it. It's layered through multiple shell accounts. I suspect it ends in offshore banks. But one of these accounts," she pointed to a long series of numbers, "is flagged for suspicious activity by Interpol. If we can show that Gareth is the sole operator, we've got him." Henry drummed his fingers on the desk. "We need something conclusive. Bank statements, a recorded admission, anything that nails Gareth without a shred of doubt. The last thing we want is him slipping away on a technicality." Lauren's mind was racing. "You said you had board meetings scheduled for next week, right? Gareth will be there?" "Yes," Henry replied. "He's pushing for a vote of no confidence in me. He's spinning the board into believing I'm behind the missing funds." Caroline's eyes gleamed. "That might work in our favor. If he's that bold, he might slip up. We can set a trap, bring forward partial evidence to provoke him into either making a mistake or revealing his hand." Henry hesitated, then nodded. "I'll need to gather the senior board members, Jacob Stone, Harriet Bryce, and Timothy Wang. They're all old school, loyal to me but also allergic to scandal. If Gareth can't persuade them, he's finished. But if he's threatened, he might lash out." Lauren squeezed Henry's shoulder. "We'll be ready." She felt a surge of determination. Her entire world had been thrown into disarray, but at least now she had clarity. She was part of something bigger than her own fears. The plan would be risky, but if it worked, they'd be free of Gareth's shadow, and maybe, just maybe, she and Henry could start rebuilding the trust they'd lost. Henry covered her hand with his, giving it a gentle press of gratitude. "Thank you for standing by me," he murmured. Lauren managed a small smile. "I'm doing this for us, Henry. That's what marriage is supposed to be, facing life's storms together." Caroline cleared her throat softly, breaking the sentimental moment. "Let's outline the specifics of this plan before Gareth decides to change tactics again." And so, the trio delved into late-night strategizing, fueled by coffee, adrenaline, and the grim resolve to bring a traitor to justice. None of them could foresee the unexpected twists that would soon turn their carefully laid plan upside down. In the days leading up to the board meeting, the atmosphere in the Donovan mansion crackled with tension. Lauren tried to keep herself steady, but the weight of anticipation bore down relentlessly. Henry, too, seemed on edge, pacing around the house or staying up late with Caroline to refine their strategy. The plan was fairly straightforward: publicly confront Gareth with partial evidence of his misdeeds, force a reaction, and record the outcome, hopefully capturing enough incriminating statements to ensure a solid case against him. But fate had other ideas. On a cool afternoon, just 2 days before the meeting, an unexpected guest arrived at the Donovan mansion. The doorbell rang, echoing ominously through the foyer. Lauren opened the door to find a tall, older man with sharply chiseled features and steely grey hair. His suit was impeccable, though an air of menace clung to him like a shadow. "Good afternoon, Miss S. Donovan," he said smoothly, extending a hand. "I'm Roland Berkeley. Perhaps your husband has mentioned me?" Lauren's pulse quickened. She'd never heard the name before. "No, I don't believe he has," she said warily. "Is there something I can help you with?" Roland offered a thin-lipped smile. "I believe your husband and I have mutual interests. May I come in?" Unease prickled the back of Lauren's neck. She should have told him to schedule an appointment through Henry's office. Yet Roland's quiet confidence held a silent threat. He didn't seem like the type to take no for an answer. Reluctantly, she led him into the living room. "I'll go get Henry," she said. Before she could move, Henry came rushing down the stairs, his expression darkening the moment he laid eyes on the visitor. "Roland," he said tersely, "what are you doing here?" Roland spread his hands in a gesture of mock innocence. "Let's just say I'm worried about the direction your company is taking, and I'd prefer to speak to you in person." Henry's jaw clenched. "Lauren, could you give us a moment?" Lauren hesitated, looking between them. Roland's gaze flicked to her, then back to Henry. "Let her stay," Roland suggested. "We're all adults here." Henry offered his wife a weary nod. "All right." Roland smoothly took a seat. "I've been hearing rumors that you're chasing after ghosts, that you suspect Gareth Fitzpatrick of wrongdoing. My sources indicate you're planning to humiliate him at the next board meeting." Lauren swallowed, wondering how Roland had gleaned such specific information about their plan. Henry stiffened. "Your sources? You mean the same sources who are helping Gareth launder money through my company?" A low chuckle rumbled in Roland's throat. "Come now, Henry, let's not be so dramatic. I merely wanted to caution you about making rash decisions. The world of business is about alliances, and Gareth has made some valuable ones." A surge of anger shot through Lauren. "Alliances that involve blackmailing and threatening us?" Roland waved a hand dismissively. "Let's think big picture. If you go through with this public showdown, the scandal could hurt Donovan and Finch beyond repair, regardless of whether or not you manage to prove Gareth's guilt." Henry's voice trembled with contained fury. "Are you here to threaten me?" "Not at all," Roland said calmly, though his eyes glinted cold. "I'm here to offer a compromise. Work with Gareth. Share in the profits. We'll make sure your name stays clean. And, of course, your lovely wife remains safe." Lauren's stomach churned at the barely veiled warning. Henry's fists clenched at his sides. "I would never let criminals run my company. And I don't take kindly to threats against my wife." Roland sighed, as though disappointed in a stubborn child. "You're determined, I'll give you that. But determination can be so costly. Perhaps you should ask yourself if you're willing to lose everything to stand on principle." A ringing silence followed. Lauren's heart thudded. She could see the tension coiling in Henry's muscles, the moral lines drawn in his face. At last, Henry found his voice. "Get out." Roland stood gracefully, straightening his jacket. "I won't overstay my welcome. Just consider your options, Henry. Some truths are best kept in the dark." He strode to the door, pausing briefly to flash Lauren a disconcerting smile. Then he was gone, leaving a residue of dread in his wake. Lauren turned to Henry, who was visibly shaking. "That's who we're up against," she whispered. Henry nodded, expression grim. One of them, anyway. In that moment, Lauren felt the weight of their choice. The path they'd chosen was dangerous, and the enemies they faced were powerful. But her resolve hardened. They had to press on. There was no turning back now. The day of the board meeting arrived like a thunderclap. Henry, Lauren, and Caroline had strategized meticulously, planning to present enough evidence to corner Gareth Fitzpatrick. The large, glass-walled conference room at Donovan and Finch was filled with tension. board members shifting uneasily in their seats. Some eyed Henry with concern. Others watched Gareth, who projected an air of smug confidence. Lauren sat beside Henry, her hands clasped beneath the table to hide her trembling. She wore a poised, elegant suit, determined to present a united front with her husband. Caroline, inconspicuously seated at the back, kept her camera phone ready to record. Gareth opened the proceedings, launching into a monologue about mismanaged funds and questionable business practices. He pointed an accusing finger at Henry, weaving a story that implicated the CEO in clandestine deals. The board members Jacob Stone, Harriet Bryce, Timothy Wang, among others, listened in stony silence. At last, Henry stood. "I appreciate your concerns, Gareth," he said, voice clipped with controlled anger. "But before we proceed with any confidence vote, I'd like to address these allegations and offer a different perspective." He motioned for the lights to dim, and a projector clicked on. Images of bank statements, forged documents, and wire transfers flickered onto the screen. Lauren explained the discrepancies, pointing out that Henry's digital signature had been falsified. She felt her heart pound as she spoke, but she forced herself to remain steady. "In light of these irregularities, it's clear there is a pattern of fraud," Lauren concluded. "We suspect it's been orchestrated by someone with access to our highest accounts." All eyes shifted to Gareth. His smug expression wavered, replaced by a tight-lipped scowl. "This is preposterous," he hissed. "You're trying to frame me to cover your own mistakes." Henry pressed a button, and a new slide appeared, a damning email chain between Gareth and Roland Berkeley, discussing secret accounts. "These are your accounts, Gareth," Henry said. "We have the digital trail. It leads right to you." Gareth stood abruptly, his chair scraping the floor. "Enough," he roared. "This entire charade is a setup. And you." He pointed a shaking finger at Henry. "You have no idea who you're messing with." Caroline discreetly kept her phone camera rolling from behind a large potted plant. She zoomed in on Gareth's furious face, capturing every word. Jacob Stone, an elderly board member known for his calm demeanor, cleared his throat. "Gareth, if you have evidence to the contrary, please present it." Gareth's face hardened. He shot a glance at the door, his eyes flickering with desperation. Then, to everyone's shock, he lunged forward. With a swift motion, he grabbed a folder from Henry's seat, ripping out several documents. "You think you can pin this on me?" he snarled, scanning the pages. "We have powerful allies, Henry. You can't possibly win." Everything erupted at once. Harriet Bryce stood, calling for security. Timothy Wang pushed away from the table, looking shaken. Lauren tried to grab the papers from Gareth's hands. Caroline leapt from the sidelines, phone still recording. Chaos filled the conference room. Gareth sidestepped Lauren, nearly knocking her over, and made a dash for the door. Two security guards rushed in, but Gareth was quick. He shoved one aside, elbowed another, and sprinted down the hallway. Henry raced after him, Lauren close behind, her heels clacking on the polished floors. Caroline trailed with the phone, capturing the entire chase. Down the corridor they ran, weaving past startled employees. Finally, Gareth reached the stairwell, but Henry tackled him at the top step. Both men tumbled, sending painful echoes through the concrete staircase. Gareth tried to wrestle free, but Henry pinned him. Security guards arrived moments later, panting. It was over. Gareth Fitzpatrick was detained, and the evidence was out in the open. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Lauren rushed to Henry's side, breath coming in ragged gasps. He looked up at her, relief and exhaustion warring on his face. The threat that had loomed over them for months was subdued, at least for now. But Gareth's final words as they hauled him away echoed in the hallway. "You haven't seen the last of us. We're everywhere." The immediate aftermath was a whirlwind. The board convened an emergency session, deciding to suspend Gareth and hand over all evidence to the authorities. Caroline handed over her recorded footage along with her investigative documentation. Henry exhaled a shuddering breath, feeling the weight lift from his shoulders. Lauren, still trembling with adrenaline, could barely process that it was finally done. Yet the sense of triumph proved fleeting. The following day, as they met with lawyers and prepared for potential legal battles, another storm broke. Rachel Morgan called Lauren in a panic. "Turn on the news! Now!" Lauren grabbed the remote, flipping to a local station. There, a grim-faced reporter stood in front of Donovan and Finch's headquarters, microphones swirling around him. The headline read, "Shocking allegations, Henry Donovan under investigation." Lauren's heart lurched. The reporter spoke. "This morning, an anonymous source leaked documents suggesting Henry Donovan masterminded an elaborate fraud scheme at Donovan and Finch, implicating him in millions of dollars of illegal transactions. Our sources say law enforcement has opened a formal probe." She turned to Henry, eyes wide with horror. "What? How is this possible? We just exposed Gareth. Why are they coming after you?" Henry looked stunned. "They're using the same fabricated evidence Gareth created, and maybe more. Roland must be behind this. They're flipping the narrative against me." As if on cue, the doorbell rang. Caroline, who had stayed the night in a guest room, rushed down the stairs. Henry went to answer, opening the door to two stern-faced detectives. One flashed a badge. "Henry Donovan, we have a warrant to search the premises." Lauren stood behind Henry, her heart pounding. Caroline exchanged a worried glance with them, but nodded for Henry to comply. Fighting the search would only make him look more guilty. With resigned dread, Henry stepped aside. "Please, come in." The detective swept through the house, rummaging through documents, computers, and anything else that might serve as evidence. Lauren stood by helplessly, forced to watch them dismantle their privacy. A swirl of panic and fury churned in her stomach. Meanwhile, Henry made calls to his legal team, voice wavering with barely contained anger. Caroline tried to reassure Lauren. "They won't find anything. We have all the real evidence to exonerate Henry." But Lauren wasn't so sure. If Gareth and his powerful allies like Roland had orchestrated a smear campaign, it was possible they planted false trails. Henry's rightful innocence could be buried under a mountain of manufactured evidence. By the time the detectives left, the entire estate was in disarray. Boxes of Henry's files were seized, along with several computers. One detective turned to him sternly. "Mr. Donovan, don't leave town. We'll be in touch." The door closed, leaving a suffocating silence behind. Henry pressed his forehead against the wall, his shoulders shaking in silent rage. Lauren touched his back gently. "We'll get through this. We'll clear your name." Henry turned, eyes blazing. "We did everything right. We caught Gareth red-handed, and now they're turning it on me." Caroline cleared her throat. "We need to move fast. I'll analyze the situation. If they leaked false documents, there must be a way to trace it back to Gareth or Roland." Lauren took a steadying breath. "We have to fight. We've come too far to let them ruin our lives." Even as her words came out, she felt a knot of fear in her stomach. Fighting might mean stepping further into the dangerous arena Henry had tried to shield her from. There would be no going back to the life of blissful ignorance she once knew. But it didn't matter. They were in this together now, for better or worse. With Henry's reputation under attack, the circle of people he could trust grew smaller. The day after the search, calls from anxious board members poured in. Some expressed support, but others distanced themselves, fearful of a public relations catastrophe. Donovan and Finch's stocks took a hit, and rumors swirled through the city. Lauren sat in the living room with Caroline, scanning news sites and social media. Story after story painted Henry as a cunning manipulator. It stung to see the man she knew who valued honesty and integrity portrayed as a villain. Rachel Morgan arrived mid-morning, a swirl of energy. "I've been pulling every string I can to quiet the tabloids," she said, setting her laptop down. But it's an uphill battle. The rumors keep multiplying. Henry joined them, cheeks pale with exhaustion. He hadn't slept much, worried about the case. "We need a statement," he said. "Something to counter the lies." Caroline nodded. "A press conference might help, but we need tangible evidence. Something that proves Gareth's wrongdoing and your innocence in one fell swoop." Rachel snapped her fingers. "What about that offshore account you were investigating? If we can link Gareth's personal data to those transactions definitively, it'll overshadow the planted evidence." Caroline tapped at her keyboard. "Yes, exactly. I've been trying to crack it, but it's hidden behind layers of encryption. We might need a cyber expert." Henry frowned. "That'll take time we don't have. The longer these allegations fester, the more people believe them." Silence fell over the group, tension thick in the air. Suddenly, Lauren remembered something. "Wait, Gareth snatched a folder during the boardroom chaos, but we got some of it back, right? Is there anything in those documents that could tie him to the offshore accounts?" Henry rummaged through the disheveled pile on the coffee table. "Yes, these are the ones we recovered from him. Caroline, see if there's anything that stands out." Caroline combed through the papers, reading intently. Then her eyes lit up. "This page is a partial bank statement. Look at the bottom. There's an account number matching one of the suspicious shell companies we identified." Henry leaned over her shoulder. "The transaction date. It coincides with the day Gareth had a business trip in Bermuda." Rachel broke into a triumphant smile. "That's huge. If we can show proof that Gareth accessed that account from Bermuda where the shell company is registered, then we've got a direct link." "He can't pin that on Henry." Excitement buzzed among them. Caroline carefully scanned the rest of the recovered documents. "We'll cross-reference these details with flight logs, hotel records, anything that puts Gareth in Bermuda. At the same time money was moved through that shell account." Henry nodded grimly. "Then we'll present it to the authorities, along with the rest of our data." Lauren squeezed his hand. "We're close, Henry. We're going to clear your name." Despite the ongoing turmoil, a glimmer of hope flickered to life. For the first time since the disastrous board meeting, they had a solid lead that could expose Gareth and, by extension, Roland and their sinister network. Working together, they felt a renewed sense of purpose. Truth, they believed, would prevail. After days of non-stop investigating, Henry, Lauren, and Caroline finally linked Gareth Fitzpatrick's shady transactions to a network of shell companies. With board member Jacob Stone's help, they secured a secret meeting with District Attorney Miriam Downey. Calm yet formidable, Downey examined their evidence, financial statements, email chains, and Caroline's documentation, and deemed it credible enough to pursue charges. Buoyed by her support, they left the meeting feeling hopeful. But that night, Henry got a call from Roland Berkeley. Speaking with cold arrogance, Roland warned Henry to abandon his crusade or face devastating consequences. Lauren's blood ran cold at the explicit threat to harm not just Henry, but her as well. Though shaken, the Donovans and Caroline refused to back down. Gareth was only a pawn in a much larger game, and Roland was making it clear there were bigger forces at play. Despite the looming danger, they pressed forward, knowing the truth was finally within reach. In the wake of Gareth Fitzpatrick's arrest, a wave of relief swept through Donovan and Finch. At long last, the fraudster faced charges of embezzlement and conspiracy, and the once relentless media storm against Henry began to subside. Yet the victory felt precarious. As Henry watched news coverage of Gareth being led away in handcuffs, he sensed the threat was not entirely gone. Deep down, he knew there were others pulling the strings. That lingering dread crystallized when an unknown number called Henry at home. Lauren stood beside him as he answered, heart pounding at the unmistakable voice of Roland Berkeley. Calm, yet menacing, Roland congratulated Henry on catching Gareth, but warned him that powerful allies still lurked in the shadows. When Henry refused Roland's demand to drop any further investigations, Roland's tone turned chilling. "You'll regret this." The line went dead, leaving a sense of foreboding in its wake. A few days later, Roland himself walked into Donovan and Finch as if he owned the place, sneering at security measures. Confronting Henry in his executive office, Roland made one final offer: abandon the pursuit of Gareth's network and keep Donovan and Finch intact, or see both the company and Henry's family suffer. Lauren, seated nearby, felt her blood run cold at the ultimatum. Henry refused. His defiance ignited Roland's fury. In a moment of desperation, Roland seized a concealed gun from Henry's desk, startling them all. With a roar, he aimed it at Henry. Lauren screamed, scrambling to protect her husband. In the chaos, a security guard tackled Roland just as the weapon discharged. The bullet pierced the ceiling instead of Henry's chest, and the office filled with shocked cries. Pinned to the ground, Roland spat threats. "I have allies everywhere. This isn't over." But as armed guards hauled him away, Henry and Lauren clung to each other, breathless with relief. A sense of finality settled over the room. The ringleader behind Gareth Fitzpatrick's treachery had revealed his hand, and he'd lost. In the aftermath, investigators seized Roland's documents and phone records, tying him to a wider criminal network. Once again, Henry cooperated fully, relieved that the full truth was at last surfacing. As the authorities delved deeper, the Donovan family braced for any remaining surprises. They had walked through fire to reach this moment. Henry might still face legal hurdles. The company's reputation still needed repair. But at last, the looming menace had a face, and that face was now in custody. Side by side, Lauren and Henry realized they had survived the storm. After all their fears and misunderstandings, what truly mattered was that they had refused to abandon each other, even when it felt like the entire world was against them. In the days after Roland's arrest and Gareth's downfall, Henry Donovan finally found peace. The authorities dismantled large parts of the criminal network threatening Donovan and Finch, and the public's opinion shifted, seeing Henry as a victim of betrayal, not its perpetrator. Through it all, Lauren remained by his side, determined to reclaim the life they'd nearly lost. Their marriage, tested by secrecy and danger, emerged stronger. One morning, Lauren discovered Henry in the kitchen, making breakfast, something he hadn't done in months. They quietly reflected on how fear and distrust had almost torn them apart. Over steaming coffee, they vowed never again to keep each other in the dark. Though the legal aftermath was messy, the truth ultimately prevailed. Gareth faced multiple convictions, and Roland Berkeley was charged for his violent attack and conspiracy. Donovan and Finch began rebuilding its reputation with a renewed emphasis on honesty and transparency, something both Henry and Lauren were committed to protecting. In the end, the night Lauren spotted her husband entering that hotel with a supposed mistress marked only the beginning of a harrowing journey, one revealing a plot far more sinister than simple infidelity. The ordeal taught them that real love, tested by the darkest suspicions, can be reforged into something unbreakable. And as each new dawn lit their once troubled estate, Lauren and Henry lived by a hard-won pledge: face everything together, no matter the cost. Thank you for joining us on this roller coaster of secrets, suspense, and ultimately, renewal. From the moment Lauren feared her millionaire husband was creeping into a lavish hotel with a mistress, to the shocking revelation of a high-stakes conspiracy, their journey reminds us how easily trust can shatter and how courageously it can be reclaimed. If you enjoyed this story of unexpected twists, hidden agendas, and unwavering love, please support our channel by hitting the like button, sharing your thoughts in the comments, And, of course, subscribing for more dramatic tales. Every like and subscription helps us bring you bigger, bolder stories, ones that keep you on the edge of your seat and remind you of the indomitable spirit that resides within us all. Thank you for being part of our storytelling community, and we look forward to sharing more real-life drama fiction with you soon.